Josh, how's it going, man?
Hey, man, how are you doing today?
Good. Hopefully you got on live as well. I know I got a few on my end watching, but we'll record it regardless. So, Josh, we met. I was just telling some of the people that are watching on my end. We met basically only through Instagram. You had sent me a message a while back. I was playing around on Instagram with some of our new graphics, things like that, and got a message from you. It came across our page, and we got to talking that you had become kind of a new youth pastor, a new pastor in New Jersey, and we kind of talked about graphics and social media and all that stuff. And I'm glad that we had kind of gotten a connection. But Josh, I want you, if you could kind of tell everybody a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your church. I haven't given too much of an introduction, so feel free to take the stage and kind of tell everybody who you are.
Yeah, man, I'd love to do that. So I know you just told everybody that I met you through Instagram. It's kind of an odd way to meet another youth pastor, but I just started the church Instagram page, and I was trying to get some ideas, and because I never really had Instagram when I was in college. I had it back when I was in high school, and then I deleted it when I got to college because I just didn't have time. And I think I wasted a lot of time on social media too. So it was kind of a distraction. So I deleted it. And then, so I didn't have it for like several years. And then being part of the church and seeing the need to get on social was important. So I just kind of started up and tried to get some ideas and started to get the ball rolling on that. And that's kind of how we met. But as far as myself, the thing that people probably notice about me is I have two first names, Josh John. So I usually get called out on that a lot. But, I was born in India. And so the Indian tradition, at least in the part of India that I was born in, is that you take your dad's first name as your last name. And so my dad's first name is actually John. So that's why my last name is John. But we stopped that tradition when I got married. And so my wife just took my last name, and it's just going to be John from here on out. So, but that's, I was born in India, and then my parents moved to Chicago when I was about 5 or 6 years old. And that's where I grew up for most of my life, and attended a church there, First Baptist Church of Burbank, Illinois. And then I went through a Christian school until I was a senior. And then when I graduated, I went to Bible college. God called me to preach between my junior and senior year of high school. And so I went to Bible college after I graduated and spent 4 years at Bible college down in North Carolina. And then God actually moved me back to Illinois for a year to intern at a church. And my wife, who was then my girlfriend, and we got engaged that year after I graduated. That year I was interning at that church in Illinois. She was living in New Hampshire. During that time, she actually moved to Pennsylvania as well. And then we got married last June, and then we moved to New Jersey shortly after that. So we've been here at the church in New Jersey for less than a year, since the end of June last year. So that's kind of our story in short form till this point. Our church is in, technically the name of it is Kendall Park Baptist Church, but we're technically in Franklin Park. But at one point it was in Kendall Park until the city.
That's funny you say that, because when I was kind of looking at your website when I first came across you, when you first messaged me, I was confused which church it was.
Yeah. It's really confusing. And actually, we bought some property, and so one day we're thinking about moving down there and building a church, and so we'll have to change the name, and that way it'll be all on the same page. But so we're Kendall Park Baptist Church. Kendall Park is directly across the street from us, and technically we're in Franklin Park. So, but
Kendall Park and you'll find it.
Exactly. Yeah, go to Franklin Park and you'll find Kendall Park. So,
gotcha.
Our church is. I just love the people of our church. Just love being here. I love serving here. We candidated back in March of last year, and then we were voted in, and we knew that God was leading us here, and we came right away at the end of June after we were married. So my wife and I were married. So yeah, it's a little bit of our story in a nutshell there.
That's awesome, man. Well, hey, I know that when we were talked originally, we were kind of in a similar position, because I had started at our church the previous September or so. And I know when you messaged me, you come across our Instagram because I was kind of booting up our youth group page. And you were kind of asking about your youth group. So I know your technical title, you're an assistant pastor, but you run the youth group there as well, right?
Yep. Yes, that's part of our responsibilities. But, I love that part of it. Before this whole thing with coronavirus, we were doing Wednesday night Bible studies and having activities monthly. And we were just starting that, trying to get more regular at it. And then kind of this thing broke up our, pattern there. But that's part of the responsibilities. Do a lot with music and some other responsibilities at church. But youth is definitely a big part. I love that part.
I'll tell you, because I run our church social media and pretty much all our social media that goes out of our church. And I know when you originally messaged me about graphics and all that, you guys have excelled incredibly on your social media. I saw a few videos you guys posted recently. So if you guys are listening, make sure you guys go follow them because they put out a lot of good stuff on there too. But I was glad to see that you because you originally messaged me like, where in the world do you start? And it's difficult. It's like, where do you even, what do you use? Where do you even start with all that stuff? And
I was definitely clueless. Back in June, I was clueless and had no idea. And, I was making stuff with just no programs, and it was really tacky. And it's probably still tacky compared to what some churches are doing. But I think that's the process, right? There's always someone out there that's doing it better than you. And if you look at certain pages, you're like, man, my stuff is garbage. And what we're putting out there is just terrible. But, they that compare themselves among themselves are not wise. You do the best with what you can. You learn, you grow, and you get better and you get better. And God's pleased with that. God's pleased with faithfulness and stewarding the resource that you have, the time that you have, the money that you have, and doing the best that you can. So as long as we're making steps forward, I'm happy with that. I'm never trying to be the next great mega church or have the same social media platforms that other churches have. Although I look to them for inspiration because that's just not who we are. We're not the mega church. We don't have the 10-person social graphics team. There's one guy and he's just starting to learn. So my stuff isn't going to be what his is going to be. And that's okay. That's not what God expects. And that's not what our church expects. We just want to improve in those areas if we can reach people through it. So, and
it's funny you bring that up because I think when we were talking a little bit the other day when we were on video chat at how important the social media has become, especially now, because church basically is social media now. I mean, social media's kind of went from something that is like, it's a cool thing to have and it can help in some ways to now it's literally the church, like it's essential. But how have you guys, in your church, and I'll kind of touch on after you're done, I'll kind of touch on what we've done, but how have you guys at your church transitioned from social media just being another avenue to being something that's, being essential, and what kind of things are you guys doing to keep around that?
I want to preface these comments with saying it's the next best thing, but it can never substitute the physical gathering that, the church is an assembly that assembles, right? When you can't assemble, you're missing a big part. The church is still the people. I agree with all the pastors out there that are tapping that out on social media, and I agree with that. It is the people. That's what the church is, but what the church does is it gathers, it edifies. We have corporate worship, we preach, we sing, we say hello to one another, we encourage one another, and that happens with a physical gathering. And so you're missing a big part. And so I think there's a lot of people, and this touches on different philosophies of ministries and what you believe on theology and all that stuff as well. I don't know if we'll get into that today, but there are some people that are equating it and social media with something that was there before. And I don't necessarily know that I'm going to go down that trail, because I think while it's the best thing that we have, we should utilize it and do the best that we can. We still long to meet together, as a church corporately. So, but that being said, some of the things that we're doing is, we already had live streaming up and running some years before coronavirus. And so it was just a matter of making that better. We already had a nice video camera, had some good things going. It just needed to get a little better. And so we were improving in those areas, just making content that people can, things like seeing the pastor regularly, having him communicate through social media. Some of that stuff we weren't doing because we were doing that every weekend, and Wednesday nights and Sunday nights, and now we can't do that. So having more of that content, I think, is important. It's good, and we're working towards that. Just taking some of the aspects that we already had, and then just improving on them, and in volume and also in quality. Yeah.
Yeah, it's something that I think is interesting, because we've gone from, again, social media is something that we've used, more for fun, and just not necessarily just for fun, but for just to improve things, where now it's gotten to something that's essential. And I know you guys, it sounds like we're way ahead of us. I mean, when this thing happened, we had a time period where we were discussing whether to close or not. And I'm sure you guys did too.
Sure.
And then after we, decided to close, it was, okay, what do we do? And the Sunday before we voted on that, we had an iPad propped up in our auditorium, and Facebook Live. And I mean, it was dreadful. You couldn't hear anything and see, but it was as a way for the people that were scared to come to church, or didn't want to come for whatever reason. That showed them the service. They could see it.
Right.
So after that, we're like, okay, we got to get something better than this, because you can't even really tell what's even going on. So we went out, we bought a Rebel T6 Canon camera, and just worked at it. I mean, I had never done any photography before. I had no clue. I was watching YouTube videos, learning how I learned how to do literally everything else. But it's a process, going from, your biggest concern on Sundays, your soundboard going out or something, or
right.
popping speakers or something, to literally something going wrong with your camera and not having service. But it's been a process, and I know I've been watching some of the stuff you guys put out with like your promo videos, and you guys seem to have it down. You've had a little bit of experience with it at least, but
yeah, I think it's the same veins of the social media thing. There's always a church that's doing it better, and there's always a church that's doing it worse. But when you start saying, "Oh, look, at least we're not them," or "Oh man, I wish I could be them," I think we just get into a territory where it's like, that's not what God's given us. And so if you guys have bought a camera for the first time and you're using it, hey, that's awesome, man. I think I just saw a social media post the other day, it said something along the lines of, I'm just enjoying the fact that there are shaky cameras and people that have no idea what they're doing, putting the gospel out on the internet for the first time. And that's their, that's like Mary, opening that alabaster box and pouring out this sweet oil. It's what they have to offer to Jesus, and God accepts that. And so, if you're doing your part and you're trying to get the word out, and with the tools that you have, hey, praise the Lord. That's what God expects. And we're all different places and with different things. That's awesome.
Yeah, I know the post you're talking about. That's such a good truth, and that helped me, because I know when I was doing all this, I would watch our videos and I'd go watch, some mega church there, and I'm like, man, that doesn't even compare.
It's not even close.
Like, they got like commercial level stuff going on there, and but yeah, when you think about it, it's like, is the message any different? I mean, it's still the message. It's still the gospel being preached. And I think that's what's important. I think that the members of the church, they don't care. People, it may affect somebody that's used to that commercial level production. They may say, oh, well, I trust this church more because they got, more resources or whatever. But the members of the church, when I talk to people, I don't hear anybody say like, I love the message, but that video quality wasn't really that great.
Right. And I think if that's your target audience is your people, right? Because we can't physically gather, and so I think you're right on there. I think the quality to them. I have had people that have said, "Man, that was really good," and I was like, "That one, that video is garbage." I thought you would mention this other one, but there's some people just see things differently,
right?
And so, I'm with you on that as well.
Well, let me ask you this before we get into. I got some things to talk about, kind of more on a spiritual level, I guess. But I wanted to ask you this, just from my own curiosity. Who do you use when it comes to social media? It comes to your youth group, all that. What's your kind of biggest source of inspiration? And I hesitate doing this because I steal so much inspiration from other people. that if people start following the pages I follow, they're like, man, he doesn't come up with anything. Like, he just stole all this stuff. But even this idea of doing this series, I stole from another pastor. I thought was a great idea. So it's not all original, I promise. But who do you use, like social media pages, other pastors? What's kind of your inspiration, or do you just kind of focus
There's
it all?
Nothing new under the sun, man. When it comes to, I think I was a pastor, and this is like a really old idiom. None of the teenagers would get it, but you milk a lot of cows, but you churn your own butter, right? And that goes with like preaching messages, but also with social media. Everything is a copycat. There's a guy I subscribe to on YouTube, and he pretty much says that too. And he has great content. I think a lot of his stuff is like, I thought it was really original, but he's like, you know what? Everything's a copy for something. Feel free to use my stuff. It's just everything's a copy. So utilize it and do it. And but as far as specific people that I look to for inspiration, I don't know if I would say that I have one. There's a couple different things that I subscribe to, like podcasts or like design podcasts I listen to just to get some help or direction. Specifically, I think you pointed me towards like Igniter Media. I know that they have like a 30-day free trial right now, and I just jumped on that, and that's where I'm using some of our videos. And for Easter and for Good Friday tonight, we have a Good Friday service, and we're going to use some of those videos and stuff. I think they're really well done, well made. So some of those resources are good. Some churches out there that are just, I find sometimes like church plants. There's a church out in Albany that's just getting planted, and they have actually a graphic designer that's helping that church get started. But I went to college with him, and just some of the innovative things that church plants are doing and thinking out of the box versus us who are well established, I guess you could say, churches that have kind of just done it the same way all the time. And when you hear what they're doing or the way that they're doing it, it's like, oh, that's pretty cool. We should try that. See, freshen things up a little bit. So. But I wouldn't say there's anything like, this is my go-to page that I go to for inspiration. I copy everything they do. I think it's just, whatever's coming up, and I just kind of Google it, search it up and try to find inspiration that way. Yeah. Yeah,
I think you're right there with the new church plants, because that's something that's tough coming in. That was something for me when I came in. Our church, we had an Instagram, we had a social media, but it wasn't scheduled, it wasn't regular and all that. And so me coming into that, it's tough when you already got something established, because you got to change it.
Sure.
And I think you're right. Some of my inspiration comes from those people that have just started churches. And honestly, most of my inspiration that I get comes from churches that I wouldn't agree with their beliefs. And I don't know why that is. And I have something a question later on I kind of want to talk to you about regarding that. Sure. But I think that, certain denominations do better with social media than others. And so I'm thinking of there's a church plant called City Light out of Las Vegas that I have gotten some inspiration from when it comes to things they've done. And there's the big churches like Elevation and Church Home and things like that. And I've gotten myself in trouble by following so many churches on, my social media, that when I'm scrolling, it's just like, oh man, I need to do that. I need to do that. I need to do this better. And, but I think you're right. Just focusing on the goal, focusing on what we're trying to accomplish is ideal. Yeah. But anyways, well, hey, let's get into some of the deep stuff, I guess, and talk about some beneficial things other than just fun on social media. So let me ask you this. Why do you think, so we're kind of in an interesting time here with this virus, and things are so much different. And I've heard a lot of people, a lot of preaching, a lot of people have talked about reasoning, why is this happening? What's God's reason? What's God's plan? What do you think? And I kind of sent you these ahead of time so we can kind of prepare and get some ideas on this. But what in your opinion, Josh, do you think is some of the reason, if there is any reason? We've had those questions. What do you think?
Sure. I thought about that. And so why do I think the virus is happening? Bottom line, I think there were some wet markets in China, and they weren't doing some things all that swell. And so I think that's how it happened. It might be just a blatant explanation of what I think caused it. I don't know if there's obviously God's in control. He's sovereign. He allowed it to happen. Is there some deep-seated reason? I don't know. There's a lot of speculation out there, right? There's a lot of preachers that are saying a lot of things. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of it is speculation. There's some biblical principles that you can loosely tie to something that's going on, but I don't know if that's the best way to look at this.
Sure.
I've read and watched certain news outlets. There's a lot of talking heads on the internet. There's a lot of theories, a lot of conspiracy theories. It's out of the wazoo. But I try not to focus on that so much as focusing on the reality of the situation, on what I do know, the facts that I know, and basing what I'm going to do based on that which is truth and not that which is maybe just pure speculation. I think we waste a lot of time thinking on what if or why versus this is what the situation is and what am I going to do because of it. That's not to say that there's people that might say whole thing is made up, and I'm not with that either because my sister's a doctor. She's helping COVID patients right now in Oklahoma, so I know that it's a real thing. It's not a hoax by any means. But I just try to approach it with the facts that I know. I think that's a good way to approach anything. That's how we should approach life practically, right? Not through the lens of what we don't know. That just, I think, feeds fear. But that which we do know, and that's what God says, and that's how we approach things biblically and how we respond biblically. And so, I don't know if there's some deep-seated reason of why this is happening or what the purpose of God is. I just don't know. I just know that this is what is happening, and I'm going to take it one day at a time and respond biblically to what comes across my path and across my way. So, yeah.
I like what you said at the beginning there, how, because so many people are looking for some crazy, elaborate plan. They want to, oh, well, God's doing this so that it will bring people back to church, and so the church can be set up for the end. They want some elaborate reason, but I like your reason that that it came out of some fish market in China. And I think it goes deeper than that, because I just preached a message to our church the other night that because there's sin in the world, bad things are going to happen.
Sure.
And that's just part of it. And I think too often we like to attribute every single bad thing that happens to something. Yeah. And no doubt God has a plan, but I think you're right there that, hey, there's just sometimes we're going to face things like that because we live in a sinful world.
Yeah. And like I said, I just don't have the insight. I mean, maybe it is like the almighty judgment of God for a specific sin. All right. But maybe it's just a general result of sin and people not being sanitary or whatever, whatever the case is. I don't know. Yeah. So I just try to approach it with the facts that I do know and live it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I know that was kind of a tough thing when all this started, is so many pastors are preaching on reasoning and trying to find a reason, or even find a reason for, how to get through it and all that. It's tough. There's tough to find reasons sometimes on things that just don't make sense. Sometimes it's just not going to make sense. That's just
right.
Part of it. We're not going to answer. We're not going to understand it. And we just have to deal with it.
Devastation in Scripture. And I think some of the biblical principles that were implemented are some of the principles that we need to implement as well. And so I think some of the pastors that are preaching that way, I think some of it's good, but also I think there's a side to it where you just want to be careful.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hey, let me ask you this. Do you think, so with this virus, do you think that it is, the reason I ask this, we've had some different viewpoints, I know, among our church in general, of some people saying that this virus is almost a blessing, that this has helped people to get back to church, be more reliant on God. In your opinion, do you think this is helping church, or it is hindering it, or a little both? What do you think?
Yeah, it's a loaded question for sure. I think this touches on the previous question a little bit too. There's some level of speculation. I don't know what this will bring forth in a couple months and in a year. So I think I would have a better answer to that later on. But right now, from where we're at right now, I would say a little bit of both, for sure. I don't know if I necessarily use the word hindering it. Maybe the word hurting would be a little bit better, because the church isn't hindered because of it. Christ and he'll build the church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. So that includes persecution, that includes COVID. So the church is not going to be conquered. It's not going to be hindered in that sense. But we can't hurt because we can't corporately meet, like I already said earlier. So I think it is hurting in that way because we long to be back together. We long to have that fellowship, that time where we're together. Church isn't something that we just consume. It's something that we participate in, and you can't really participate through a screen. Now, there's people that are doing a great job of it, getting really close. But at the end of the day, you just can't have what you have in a physical gathering And I think it's also helping it, though. I think there's a lot of people realizing the potential of reaching the world through technology. I think more pastors are just putting the gospel, like I said, whether it's through a shaky iPhone video, they're still getting the gospel out there. And I think they're reaching people. I know that our pastor mentioned there's people that have been watching from his high school that have never watched, that probably have never been to church before and such. So I think that's just neat. So I think it's helping and hurting. Not hurting, but hurting, not hindering, excuse me.
Sure.
And so I think there's a little bit of both, but I think the full results of what will be, I think we'll see. We'll have to wait and see.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with all that. I think what I've seen is that it is helping those that are unsaved, but it is hindering those that are saved. I found that those that are unsaved, those that aren't in church, they're being reached more so than they were before. And I think that's, because we're in a position now in the church where we have to go out to people. We can't rely on just sitting back and hoping people come in the doors.
Sure.
We have to push out. We have to publish. We have to share things. We have to, do all that. Where before, I feel like a lot of churches just kind of waited and see, to see what happened. And so, I know we posted a video, our first, I guess it kind of started with our Facebook Live video. When we posted that, we had I want to say over 500 views or something. We're a church of maybe, about 150, 200 people on a Sunday around that. And, we had almost 500 views on a Facebook page and, reaching double who we normally reach on a Sunday. And granted, as you said, you take that aspect out of the physical interaction, which is such a huge part of church. It's different than just opening up a video and watching it. But those people that are unsaved are being reached. People through social media that maybe not be involved in church are getting reached. But like you said, those that are in church are struggling because they're not getting the
Yeah, and I think a lot of people think there's just one part of the Great Commission. It's just preaching the gospel. But there's a whole second part, right? There's the whole teaching and edifying and encouraging. That's part of the church. I don't believe that the sole goal of the church is evangelization. I think it's evangelization and edification. If you're not feeding the saints, you're not really being in the church. If you're just simply, it sounds really bad to say, but if you're simply just preaching the gospel as a church unit, you're still missing part of it. You still have to feed the people that are saved. And so that's a lot more difficult to do in this time because you need that fellowship, you need that encouragement, you need to get together for corporate worship, and when we don't have that, we're missing a big part. So yeah, I would agree with all those things that you said. I think it's helping those that are that's not biblical, and so it would be like a family that's going to eat a meal together, but they're in different rooms that are FaceTiming each other, and that doesn't make sense. That's the point of the Lord's table. It's a table. You gather around a table, right? You gather together in a place and do that. So it'd be odd for a family to do that in their own home. So why are we trying to do that? Why are we trying to bring certain elements that are rooted in a principle in Scripture and trying to bring them to this media? I don't think that's wise, nor is it biblical. So I see the differences that way. I don't think those are good things that we should be doing. So I think your theology should dictate what you do, and so there's certain things that we'll do, and there are certain things that we're just not going to do because it seems fake. It seems like we're just trying to simulate something, and a simulation at its best is just that, a simulation. So I'm not trying to fake something and try to make people feel like they're having something real when it's not real, right? And so what I want to do is make people, give them the best thing that I can, but also create a longing to be back to where we were and where we could experience and do the things that God's commanded us to do in person. I don't know if I really answered that question with different denominations doing things differently. But there are others that are doing certain things that I think that we could still be doing. And I'm trying to think some specifics. Maybe they'll come to me later, but that's kind of what I have for that question.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. And it's funny you mentioned that about the communion, because I was kind of thinking through the past few days what we're going to do for Easter and some special things. And I saw somebody doing that. And my first thought, I was like, oh, that's a great idea. We can send out, we can do the communion and all that. And then I got to thinking, just like you said, I was like, but hold on, that's something that's meant to be done in person. And that's right. A reverent thing. And I think what you do when you do that is you take the reverence out of it. it turns into something that's almost like a checklist. It's like, oh yeah, we checked communion for the month. And I loved what you said about how, if you, and this was a concern of ours, if you do everything and if you take care of everything that we had before, then it gets rid of the longing to be back in church. And I think that's a dangerous place for churches to be, because I do see a lot of churches struggling with, members going to live stream versus coming to church. Where there's that thought on Sunday morning of, well, hey, I'll just watch it. I'll just sit at home and watch it. And especially now, if people have gotten used to that for weeks and weeks and months of sitting at home watching, when we start back service, they'll think back to those months, say, oh, hey, that was great. We just got to wake up and watch service and it was over. And if you take care of everything, then we had a conversation with that, because we were looking at our music of are we going to keep doing music? It's very difficult to do through video without the right production material, and so that was one of the things is, hey, do we do congregational singing as much as we can? Do we have somebody leading music? And then the thought was, well, hey, that's one thing we can look forward to is when we get back together. Is that something we can do then? But no, I think you're right. I think that when I look at churches, I see. You can almost tell a social media page. You can tell a church what kind of denomination they are based off their social media. I feel like I don't know. I see the just my own observation is most conservative Baptist churches are don't pay as much attention to social media, and I think some of that is demographic. Most of your Baptist churches, conservative Baptist churches, are a little bit older demographics. They're not used to that. Where your Christian churches more generally are younger. But I find that interesting because it does come down to the theology, and that's so important that we keep track of the theology and what we're doing.
And as Baptists, as someone that has a high value on theology and the right interpretation of Scripture, I never want to put the cart in front of the horse. I never want to let social media or graphics or those things drive the church, or drive what I'm putting out there. I always want to let my theology drive and what I believe about Scripture drive it, and then social media can be a nice aid, a nice help, and so I think people have seen it that way, especially in the conservative Baptist circles, but the social media aspect is so behind, it's just tacky. I think there's a balance there. And so striking that balance is important, and every church is striking that balance differently. Some people are not trying to strike a balance. And so, but that brings me back to that one point that I brought back, that you just have to do. Kendall Park Baptist Church is not Elevation Church or, Bethel. It's not, Joel Osteen's church. Kendall Park Baptist Church is Kendall Park Baptist Church. We're not even like Lancaster Baptist Church, or churches that we would agree with doctrinally. We're not even them. We're us. And so we have to do things that don't compromise our doctrine, that fit within the means that we have, the resources we have, the monies that we have, the resources that we have, and do our best, and we'll be answerable to our people and to the Lord. And if we keep our focus that way, I think we'll be in a good place. Yeah.
I remember you mentioned when we first connected, somebody that we both use for inspiration is a guy named Brady Shearer on YouTube. Mm-hmm. With what's his YouTube channel? I forget the name.
Pro Church Tools.
Pro Church Tools. That's what it is. And he says something on there. There was a video I was watching one time about how social media and how everything that a church puts out should be geared to their church. And a lot of times you have, a small church of 150, 200 people should be posting those announcements and posting, prayer requests, things like that, where a church of, like Elevation or Bethel or somebody like that, they can't really do that because they have a different, they have thousands of people that are watching. And I think that's the same way with what we're doing now with the streaming. If we put out as a small church, this, huge production, and we start trying to make it look like one of those churches, it kind of alienates the members, and it kind of puts them to the side. It's like, oh, you're not important. We just want to get other people in. And for the small churches, I think that's so important to keep, who makes up your church, kind of tailor what you do to them.
Sure. Yep. And that's a great way to put it. For Easter, we're doing some more things on the production side. We'll have a couple of videos, and we'll change some things up because we've run some Facebook ads. We're targeting unsaved people, and so we're kind of doing the same thing that we do in person, right? We would hand out door hangers and flyers, things like that. We're trying to do the same things, but do it on the digital platform, and then have a push to reach unsaved. But then the Sunday following that, we're probably not going to put the same amount of money in that sense to it. We're going to try to cater towards those people that are always there on Sundays, but now they're having to watch through a screen. So,
sure. Yeah. Well, hey, let me ask you this. So once, there's going to be a time soon where all this is over. And I'm looking at, some other countries. I know that I saw the other day that Wuhan, where this actually originated, their life is almost back to normal. Like they're back to traveling, and that's incredibly hopeful, for us seeing that. But, I would expect here in the next few months, this will all be gone. We'll be traveling. We'll be, for the most part back in church. How do you see what's going on now? How do you see it affect, Christianity in general, churches, the Christian? How do you see this affecting how Christianity and how following God is done, not only on the church level, but on the Christian level as well, after all this is over? What kind of effect do you see this having?
Yeah. I think on the first Sunday back, I think there's going to be a lot of tears of joy, excitement, a renewed gratefulness, hopefully, and thankfulness that we can meet together in a public gathering, because it's so unprecedented. I hope, my prayer is that it gives us as a church a renewed zeal to be more faithful, to appreciate what we have. At Kendall Park Baptist Church, someone once said, you don't really appreciate what you got until it's taken away, right? And so I think a lot of them, including myself, we never really truly appreciated all that we had until it was taken away from us. And I think we're going to have a more renewed appreciation than we did before this happened. And so I think, the worship is going to be sweet. The fellowship is going to be sincere. I think those things are going to change a little bit. And I don't know how long it's going to last. It always seems like that stuff is short-lived, right? And then we forget. We're kind of like Israel, in the period of the Judges. We remember God's goodness and we're on fire, and then eventually just fall back in your old ways. And I don't want to do that. I hope that lasts for a long, long, long time until Jesus comes back. But I think that's going to change. I think we're going to think of technology a little differently. I think we're going to still pour some investment and time into this medium of reaching people. I think we're going to still focus on our church and our physical gatherings once again, but I think we're not going to just put live streaming and social media to the curb. I think we're going to I think a lot of churches are still going to utilize that, try to make it better, improve on that, because they see the benefits of reaching people that way. That's where people are at, right? Like we watch Brady share, and so, we know all that he says about all the hours that you have in a week. I actually looked at my phone this morning, and I looked at my stats. My iPhone, you can look at how much time I spent. So I'm going to be really candid. I spent 11 hours last week on social networking. And
that's scary.
And so strictly time speaking, if we were having normal church services, right, we would be in church I would be in church for Sunday school, Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night, and for teens. So that's about 4 hours. So if I spent 4 hours in church, I spent 11 hours last week on social networking. So from a strictly time perspective, not in priority, because I think I listen a little more carefully than when I do when I'm scrolling through Facebook, right? So in church, I listen a little more carefully. But from a strictly time perspective, social networking influenced me more than what a week of church would have done, time-based. And so that's where people are at. And by the way, I know that I've tattled on myself, but some of that is, on YouTube when you're watching a podcast or listening to a message and you're working on stuff. Just to backtrack a little bit. Some of that is working on church stuff on Facebook.
Your pastor's going to be calling you like, what?
Yeah, right. 11 hours. That's a lot of time. Anyway, that's where people are at, right? That's where people are living. There's people that I know there's teenagers in my youth group that spend more than 11 hours on social media a week. And I don't know if all of it's super productive, but if that's where people are at, why not post a verse to encourage or a question to engage or, like Brady Shearer says, a video to provoke spiritual practice right then and there, right? Why can't you do that? You should, right? If you have the availability, you have technology, you should be stewards of it. And God wants to be faithful to what we have. I think there's a lot of churches that are going to, well, I don't want to say it that way. I think me personally, make it in a personal sense. I think I'm going to answer to God for the resources that I had and how I use them, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, live streaming. I think God's going to say, I really believe this in my heart. I'm just speaking for myself. I don't want to put this on other churches. I think God's going to say, hey, Josh, you had these tools that I gave to you. I gave you this technology. I allowed you to have it. I put you in America where you have the capabilities to go out and buy this, right, to reach people. So what did you do with it? Did you bury the talent, or did you invest it and use it for my glory, right? I think that's a good way to look at it. It's a talent, it's an ability that God's given us, a resource, and we should be wise stewards of it. Is there a lot of bad on social media? Sure. But can we use it for good, for God's glory? Yeah, we can, and I think we should see it that way. So I think the church is going to change that way as well. Hopefully, that's my prayer, that we invest some time and energy into this thing of reaching people through these mediums. I think it's going to be a good way to do it, and a good thing to do, rather. And so, yeah, the physical gathering is going to be sweet. It's going to be renewed, hopefully, and that's my prayer, that we'll just enjoy the sweet corporate worship that we can once have, but also I think we'll change in the way that we use technology and live streaming and those things.
Boy, that's good. I've never thought of using social media as a command. Like that's interesting. That's right. Interesting.
And I don't want to put that on other churches, because I can't necessarily point to a verse, and there's a lot of, I think that's a more detailed conversation. But personally, I wanted to say I see it that way, where it's a tool that I have that God's given me to use, and I should use it for His glory, right? And I shouldn't use it just to waste time and just to do what I want to do on it. But if I can use this medium to reach someone or to encourage someone or to help someone, I should do it, whether it's technology or whether it's a phone call, right? It doesn't matter. And so I think I do see it as something that God is going to hold me accountable for.
No, that's great, because I think God does provide different tools, different gifts, and I know that. For instance, if God gives somebody the gift of, the gift of singing, He expects them to use that to His glory. If somebody gives a church member, the gift of giving, He expects them to use that, or the gift of, working with children or something like that. That's expected, and I would believe they would be held accountable for that. But you don't ever hear somebody say, I've been given the gift of, running a social media page, but no, God doesn't care about that. It's like because it's new, it's like new wave. Then it doesn't really matter, and that doesn't compare. Like, it's just a fun thing, and I think you're right. I mean, no doubt, there's been people through this virus that have been, that have been reached with the gospel through social media, and it's, is one more effective than the other? I don't know, but if we have the gift of door knocking and going out and spreading the gospel, or God puts somebody in a big city, and gives them the ability to go and talk to multiple people and spread the gospel that way. Are we going to stand for that too? When He, tells us, hey, I gave you the skills, I gave you the ability to run a social media page that reaches 500, 1,000 people a week. Why aren't you using it? And
right. You have people, we have an engaged audience, and I think we ought to utilize that. 100%. I think 100% we should utilize. I think one of the key differences between, I think, conservative Baptist churches and some other churches that wouldn't ascribe to where we are doctrinally, I think they view social media as a ministry, and I think we, in a large part, haven't. And I think that has to change. That has to change, because what is a ministry? I think a ministry is an avenue where you reach someone to provoke them to spiritual practice, encourage them spiritually, right? Give them doctrinal truth. Can you do that through social media? Yes, you can. And so is it a ministry? Yes, it is, right? In the strictest definition of it. But we never see it that way. I shouldn't say never. Oftentimes we don't see it that way in Baptists as a whole. But once we start seeing social media as a ministry that we can invest time, energy, and effort into, and invest even money and resources into to reach people, if we see it as a ministry, I think we can be more effective. It's always been seen as a promotional thing, something you just do or something that you have on the side. But if you see it as a real ministry, I think it can be really valuable for Baptist churches.
That's good. And I wonder when we come out of this, how that's going to change. Because I would imagine when we come out of this, there will be a lot more churches that see this as a ministry. I can't imagine that these churches, these Baptist churches and churches in general that are using social media this way, that as soon as this is over, that they're just going to drop all that. I hope that they continue to use that. But it's going to be a shift, going from something that's never been used to using it for a service versus to encourage a service or to announce a service. It's going to be different, but I'll be anxious to see. I think that, coming out of this, I hope that we don't see a reliance, a continued reliance on social media and on virtual church. So I'm afraid that when we come out of this, like I said, if we continue to do live stream, we're going to see people that are too reliant on that they choose that over church. But I don't know. I think that's something that is God's hand there, and like we said, if you keep a few things, the fellowship and the communion and the music and a few things that just can't be done as well through virtual means.
Sure.
When you reserve that for church, people will be longing for that. When it comes back, but. That's good. Well, hey, let's finish off with the big question at the end here, which I sent you. And I don't know how much, feel free to talk on this as much as you like, but there's been a lot of talk that this virus is a sign of the end times. This virus is something that is, either, predating the end times. It is, I know our pastor has preached recently, believes it's maybe a test run of the end times. And I don't think anybody knows for sure, and nobody does know for sure. But what's kind of your thoughts on that? I've researched it a lot just because we just finished a series on the end times recently. Man, we went way in depth in it. We did like a 4 or 5 week series on it, and it was great. So my teenagers know all about it. But do you think what are your opinions? What kind of messages and teaching have you heard on this? What, if any, connections to the end times? What do you think?
Well, that's definitely one of the thoughts that comes across, is that this is a sign of the end times. But, we have to live with a perspective. At least my theology dictates, that Jesus come back anytime. And so I live with the idea that there's an imminent rapture. So Jesus come back. The imminence of Christ is for right now, right? And so personally, listen, I don't need a sign. He can come back at this moment in the middle of this conversation. He can come back. And so his return is imminent as ever in the present. And so that's how I live. And that's how we have to live. He can come back today. He can come back anytime. And so, it can happen at a moment. I think sometimes we focus on the situation and we start diving into all the different prophecies and stuff. I think something that is healthy. I think it's good. I think prophecy, it's in the Bible. It's all throughout it. So there's there for a purpose, no doubt. And we should preach on it. We should teach on it. But I think there are others that maybe focus too much on it to the point where it now dictates the way that they, think about certain things, and they start going into all these, like I said, conspiracy theories, and I don't think that's healthy either. So as a Christian, I just live with the knowledge that Christ can return any moment, and that's the bottom line.
That's a
coronavirus or no coronavirus, he can come back anytime. If their vaccine comes out tomorrow, and everything's eradicated and people are all better, his return is just as imminent. So
yeah, that's good, because the question I've had with, and I made a post. I'm probably confusing a lot of people, because I made a post on my personal social media a while back where I put I listed there were 3 earthquakes that happened in a day. So I listed the earthquakes, and I was like, there's a locust swarm in Africa, and then the virus, and there's all these things I listed, and then I listed the verse out of Matthew, where I think it was Matthew, where it talks about all those things, and I just left it at that just because I found it was interesting. But my viewpoint on it, like you said, is what does it matter even if it is? If it is a sign of the end times, why does it matter? If we're ready for it, it's like what? How do we act differently? If God tells us this is definitely a sign of the end times, what does it matter? Should we go witness more? We should be doing that anyway.
Yeah, for sure. I believe that there's signs for Christ's second coming, but the rapture of the church is imminent. So I'm not going to be around for the signs of the second coming. That's after the tribulation. So no signs need to be fulfilled for Christ's return. That's what I believe theologically. So I'm not necessarily looking for signs. Do cataclysmic events point to the fact that the world is going to end with Christ? Yeah, sure, it does. But the rapture of the church is not based on science. It's just based on Christ's imminent return. So, and then I think in the tribulation, you're going to see a lot more of this stuff. And it's going to happen.
Yeah, and that's a good thing too, because I've heard so much teaching on, for instance, every time something like this happens, it's the end times is coming near. But if you study your Bible, those end times, those are things during the tribulation. So
Correct.
A lot of people, they like to stretch that and say, oh, well, if there's, famine in the tribulation, then the beginning of the famine will happen before the tribulation. It's it never says that.
Right.
It never says, when it's talking about the earthquakes and it's talking about the pestilence and all that, say at the earliest, it's 7 years from now that happens, or even 3.5 or whatever. That doesn't mean that we're going to see that.
Yeah, the whole days of Noah and all that, those different prophecies, I put them in the tribulation era before the second coming of Christ, where the church is already raptured out, and so all the crazy diseases and pestilences and all that, I always put that in the tribulation. So when I preach it, what my theology dictates is that Christ can come back anytime, and zero signs, that's okay. He's going to come back anytime. So that's what I believe.
Yeah, and that's exactly how we hold to it too, and that's important, because I've heard so much preaching on that recently. Of this is the end time, better get ready, and I think what's there to get ready for? Like if we're saved, we don't have to worry about it anyways, because those things will happen. But if we're not, like, why are we waiting around? Like why are we why are we waiting?
We're busy for the Lord now. Yeah.
Right. So, well, good man. Well, hey, I am so happy that you were able to talk to me. I know that we're going to post this on our social media so people can watch it later. And but let me kind of open it up to you. You got anything else that you want to say to anybody? For any viewpoints, anything we talked about, anything else before we conclude here?
I don't think so. It was a really good conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I think it was encouraging, it was edifying, and I think it was healthy. So yeah. It was good. Awesome,
man. Wonderful. Well, I'm going to end off here. I got a few words for my people on my end, but hopefully we can both post this up and some people get some encouragement out of it too. So thank you so much. We'll be praying for you guys. For everybody that's watching, make sure you go follow their social media. It's let's see if I remember, KPBC. KPBC, there you go. Go follow their church page and their teen page. They got a lot of good stuff on there. See what they're doing. And until then, Josh, thanks so much for joining me, man. We'll be praying for you guys.
All right. Appreciate that, man. You too. Bye.
Thanks, man. We'll see you. All right. Well, thanks guys for joining us. I know Josh has been a good virtual friend of mine, so it's been encouraging for me to have somebody else, kind of in the same field as I am, to talk about some of these things. We're going to have another episode of our Real Talk series coming up soon. Not sure when. I got a few other people that I'm looking into to talk to. If you guys have any recommendations, feel free to DM me. Let me know. I'd love to see who we can talk to. I'd love to do these more often, so you guys can kind of get a viewpoint of other pastors and other people, how they're dealing with this. So hope you guys enjoyed. We'll be posting this, so if you weren't able to join it live, you can see it on our hopefully on our Facebook, on the church YouTube, on the Instagram, all that. But other than that, hope you guys are doing well. We'll be praying for you. Stay encouraged, stay uplifted in this time. If you're watching or if you're a member of our church, make sure you go and watch our service. We have a big Easter service this Sunday. So make sure you go watch that. It'll be posted at 10 a.m. on Sunday. So hope you guys have a good day. Stay healthy, and we'll see you next time.